Welcome to the deep dive. We take a stack of sources, articles, research, or notes and dive in to pull out the crucial insights, the stuff that really helps you get informed fast.
It's about navigating complexity, finding the key pieces of information and understanding why they matter. We're doing the legwork so you get the distilled knowledge.
Exactly. And today, we're digging into a case that is incredibly complex and, frankly, chilling from Taiwan. The Hualien five-children murder case.
Right.
This was a tragedy that gripped the nation back in 2006. It involved a family, their five young children, and a mystery that hung over Taiwan for nearly a decade.
It's a difficult topic, no doubt. We're dealing with profound loss and, well, disturbing human behavior. But by carefully examining the facts from the sources, we can uncover important perspectives.
Perspectives on what? Like family systems under pressure?
Yeah, that and the role of forensics, how society processes these kinds of unimaginable events.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to trace the timeline of what happened, dissect the baffling investigation that followed, understand the deep social impact this case had.
Look at the questions that still linger, definitely.
Right, and see where this fits in Taiwan's history of crime.
So let's start at the beginning. The crime itself, back in September 2006, what do the sources reveal?
Okay, let's unpack this. The sources pin the events down to between September 4th and 5th, 2006, specifically in Hualien County.
And the perpetrators, according to the sources,
Yeah.
well, they were the children's own parents. Lu Chi-chen, he was 48, and his wife, Lin Chen-mi, 35. His third wife, actually.
The victims were their five children, and the ages, they were quite spread out from 9 to 18.
Yeah, the sources list them. 18-year-old eldest son, 17-year-old second son, 15-year-old eldest daughter, 12-year-old second daughter, and the youngest, a 9-year-old son.
And it's worth noting, the sources point this out, it was a mixed family, right? 3 older kids from Lu's previous marriage, the 2 younger ones from his marriage with Lin.
What's immediately clear from the sources is the element of planning. Before the killings even happened, Lu lied to his Photoshop employees.
Oh, yeah. What did he say?
He told them the children needed medical treatment up in Taipei. So this wasn't some spontaneous act. There was preparation involved.
And the killings themselves, they weren't all at once either. The sources indicate this unfolded over 2 days.
2 days. Likely the 3 sons on the first day, September 4th, and then the 2 daughters the next day, the 5th, after they got home from school.
God, the thought that some children went to school while their siblings were already, it's just horrifying to think about.
It's almost impossible to process. And the crime wasn't discovered until September 8th. Neighbors reported a strong odor from the house. That's what led police to break in.
And the house was locked.
Locked from the inside, yeah.
And the scene police found inside. It's described by veteran officers, and this is one of the most disturbing details from the sources.
What was it?
The 5 children, dead in the second-floor bathroom, stacked, one on top of the other. Yeah. Hands and feet bound with wire, faces sealed with tape, heads covered with plastic bags. But what really stands out is how officers described it. The calmest homicide scene they'd ever encountered in a family case.
That word, calmest. It's so chilling. It doesn't suggest chaos or, a crime of passion. It points to extreme control, methodology.
Exactly. And the methods were brutal. Suspected drugging sources mentioned fish water was found. It's a plant sometimes used for its properties.
Right, incapacitating properties. And wire binding, strangulation, tape over the face, suffocation. The variety maybe suggests different approaches.
Could be. But the systematic nature, that's what highlights the coldness. Spread over 2 days, the precise methods, and that horrifying tidiness, the bodies neatly stacked.
And the fact that Lin Chen-mi, the mother, could apparently maintain this facade, even calling a school to say her child was sick while this was happening.
It points to some kind of profound psychological state, doesn't it? Experts later speculated on things like extreme psychological detachment or maybe even a shared psychotic disorder.
Where delusion is shared by 2 people. Right, that's fascinating. And it complicated things for the police immediately, this horrific crime, but this calm, controlled scene.
Right, and then there were those strange SOS notes found inside the locked house.
Ah, yes, the notes. Written on paper, even on a $1,000 bill, claiming things like, held captive by O control since the 25th, children critical, please call police immediately, SOS.
So initially, that completely threw investigators off, didn't it? Suggested kidnapping, some outside force.
Totally. But handwriting analysis eventually confirmed Lu Chi-chen wrote them himself.
And that's a key insight right there. Even in the immediate aftermath, he's trying to control the narrative, mislead the investigation from inside the crime scene he created. What does that tell you about his mindset?
Calculation. Beyond just simple desperation, maybe. Other evidence started painting a clearer picture, too. Financial records showed Liu was deep in debt, over NT $10 million.
Wow.
And a handwritten expense list found at the scene really underscored that financial pressure he was under.
And the murder tools themselves, the tape, the wire, they were traced back to the house's own storage, right?
Exactly, which started ruling out an intruder bringing them in.
What about the drugging? The fish waddle plant?
Well, that was found, yes.
Yeah.
Suspected for drugging. But the toxicology reports were tricky. They only showed a general poisoning reaction.
What does that mean?
Meaning some kind of toxin was present, but they couldn't pinpoint the exact drug or poison used to incapacitate the children. So, bit of a question mark there.
Okay, but here's where technology years later played such a crucial role. A digital camera was found at the scene.
Right, but without its memory card. So initially it seemed like a dead end.
Until 2015, almost a decade later.
Exactly. Advancements in digital forensics allowed investigators to recover photos from the camera's internal memory, not the removable card, but data stored on the camera itself. Recovering that hidden data, that was the breakthrough.
And the photos they recovered, what did they show?
Horrifyingly direct evidence. One showed Liu tying up a child. Another photo showed a daughter with tape wrapped around her head, appearing deceased.
Oh my God.
And the angles strongly suggested that Lin Zhenmi, the mother, likely took those photos. This evidence directly implicated both parents in the act. It was crucial for finally solidifying the case years later.
The sources also mention a report. Something about a potential videotape of the killing filmed by Lim.
Yes, that report surfaced. But police publicly denied its existence. So that adds another layer of mystery, raises questions about how evidence, especially really disturbing material, was handled. Was it transparency? Was something suppressed?
Okay, so after the crime was discovered on September 8th, the parents just vanished.
Disappeared. They were listed as wanted fugitives in November 2006. There was surveillance footage showing Lin buying stuff at a convenience store, which suggested some prep for going on the run.
And then nothing for 9 years.
9 long years. Just silence. Until June 2015.
What happened then?
2 skeletons were discovered. In a mountainous area in Jian, Hualien, DNA confirmed they were Liu and Lin.
And how did they die?
Forensic analysis determined suicide. They poisoned themselves with the pesticide methanol. Bottles were found nearby.
So in September 2015, the case was officially closed.
That's right. Because the main suspects were deceased, prosecutors issued a non-indictment ruling. The official conclusion, based on all the evidence, especially those photos.
Was that the Liu couple killed their 5 children and then committed suicide, likely out of fear of punishment or just sheer despair?
Exactly. It really underscores the value of preserving evidence, for future tech breakthroughs. But those 9 years they were missing.
Still a huge blank space. How did they survive? What were they thinking during that time? That the sources just don't have those answers. And that void, it fuels so much of the ongoing speculation.
So while the forensics brought legal closure, the full human story, particularly their time on the run, it's lost.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. Let's talk about the immediate social impact this case had in Taiwan back in 2006. The discovery must have caused just nationwide shock, terror even.
Oh, absolutely. The extreme brutality, it fundamentally challenged deeply held beliefs about family, about parenthood. The idea that a tiger doesn't eat its cubs. Completely shattered. The Taipei Times reported investigators were stumped, which really reflected that collective disbelief.
And the media coverage, I imagine, was intense.
Understandably. It focused on the horrifying details, the missing parents, those bizarre SOS notes. The media and police pretty quickly zeroed in on the parents as suspects, even before definitive proof like the photos came out years later.
And here's where it gets particularly interesting from a cultural perspective, right? The supernatural elements.
Yes, they entered the narrative really quickly. By October 2006, less than a month after the discovery, some media were already reporting on spiritual or supernatural aspects.
Ghost stories started circulating.
Yeah, sightings of the children's spirits, weird sounds, unsettling experiences reported by police, reporters, later residents.
And according to the sources, this wasn't just like media hype.
Not entirely. The sources suggest it reflects how societies often cope with events that defy rational understanding, events that violate core values. Ghost stories can be a way to process trauma, to create some kind of meaning, even if it's terrifying meaning, in the face of the inexplicable.
Especially when the perpetrators are missing and justice feels unresolved.
Exactly. And it's telling that the local police chief even took the very unusual step of staying in the house, the fierce or haunted house, for 7 days.
Wow.
He was reportedly trying to dispel the rumors, but also maybe look for clues. That action alone just shows how pervasive those supernatural beliefs became.
And the local community in Giron, they suffered direct trauma. The neighbors who smelled the odor.
They were the first witnesses. And the house itself became deeply stigmatized, impacted property values, remained empty for years, a physical symbol of the tragedy's impact.
Were there discussions back then, in 2006, 2007, about the underlying factors, like the debt, Lou's psychological state?
Yes, those were touched upon. And it's important to connect this to a broader context the sources provide. A Child Welfare League report from around that same time, 2006.
What did it say?
Well, it wasn't specifically about this case, but it highlighted things like economic hardship, marital conflict, pressures on younger or new parents as significant risk factors for child abuse, and, well, filicide.
So this case, however extreme, sadly reflected some of those broader societal pressures.
It did. So while the supernatural narratives were grabbing headlines, there were also these more grounded discussions happening about the underlying societal issues that can contribute to such tragedies.
It's striking, though, isn't it, how that intense focus on the dramatic, the supernatural, which is maybe a natural human response to horror,
It can sometimes overshadow the critical need to address those deeper systemic root causes. Poverty, debt, mental health support.
Okay, so even with the official conclusion in 2015, several points of doubt, mysteries still linger around this case, according to the sources.
Yes, and they are significant. First off, the motive. The official line is economic despair, right? The NT $10 plus $1 million debt. But some police sources apparently felt Lou's debt wasn't totally insurmountable, which raises the question, was economic pressure the only driver, or were there deeper psychological factors at play? Officially, for some investigators, the motive is still called a mystery or unsolvable.
Then those bizarre SOS notes again. Why leave misleading notes implying kidnapping in a locked house if the plan was murder-suicide?
It's baffling. The sources explore possibilities, misdirection to buy time, a psychological game, an attempt to control the narrative after death, or maybe even some twisted delusion where they genuinely felt coerced by an external force they'd imagined.
There's also that suspicious house sale you mentioned earlier. Lou's selling his house to a police officer high price, renting it back immediately.
Yeah, sources suggest it was a desperate move for cash. Now, theories linking the officer to pressuring Lou to kill his kids were dismissed as illogical. I mean, why would the officer want their own property turned into a haunted house?
Sure.
But the complex, unusual nature of the transaction itself, it speaks to extreme measures, desperation, and maybe adds a layer of unease for some people looking at the case.
And that reported videotape, the one police denied.
Right, the report that Lynn filmed Lou killing the children. If such a tape existed and was suppressed, that raises serious questions about handling and transparency of incredibly disturbing evidence. Why deny it if it was real? That kind of thing fuels public mistrust, adds to the mystery.
What else?
Well, the toxicology only showing a poisoning reaction but not identifying specific drugs means the precise method used to incapacitate the children remains partially unclear.
And that chilling detail from the recovered photo of the eldest daughter?
Yes. Sources describe her tightly clasped hands, her severely bent body, as unusual for someone deeply unconscious.
Which suggests the horrifying possibility she might have been conscious or semi-conscious when photographed. It just underlines the extreme brutality.
Lou's background in the National Security Bureau is also listed as a point of doubt. Now, there's no direct link to the motive found in the sources, but his past could suggest he had training in planning, execution, or maybe evading detection that an average person wouldn't possess.
And finally, the perpetrator psychology. Debt was the official motive, sure, but experts have speculated about more complex mental health issues. Things like paranoid depression or that shared psychotic disorder between Lou and Lynn.
Suggesting the drivers went beyond just situational financial stress.
And of course, the total void. Those 9 missing years. How they hid, how they survived, their state of mind before the end. It leaves this massive gap in the story, doesn't it?
It really does. And it fuels public speculation endlessly.
These points of doubt, they're not just minor details, are they? They feel like windows into potentially complex, maybe even delusional psychological states that need to control the narrative, even after death. A deep disconnect from reality.
Or drivers just far beyond simple economic pressure. And the potential controversy over something like the videotape, it really highlights the challenge authorities face. How do you handle deeply disturbing evidence responsibly? And how can the way you handle information inadvertently fuel more questions?
Stepping back then, how does this case stack up against other crimes in Taiwan? The sources indicate it really stands out for its meticulously planned nature.
Absolutely. Compared to more impulsive acts, the sources emphasize the high level of premeditation, that chilling control. Using tools from the house, spreading it over 2 days, the misleading notes, sealing the bathroom, it all screams calculation, not a sudden breakdown.
That calm, orderly description of the scene, that's perhaps the most unsettling indicator of this planning.
It really is. And it's often compared to the 2001 Hongru-Oten case, another horrific parent-killed-children then suicide case in Taiwan. Our sources actually provide a detailed comparison.
Okay, what are the similarities and differences?
Well, clear similarities. Parents killing children, potential link to economic stress, both happened in September. And significantly, the sources note Liu searched for information on the Hongru-Oten case.
So it strongly suggests it was an inspiration for him.
Very likely. But there were critical differences. Hualien had 5 children, Hong had 3. The methods in Hualien were clear, documented. In the Hong case, the claim was cremation, which was never definitively proven.
And the parents' fate?
Different, too. Found 9 years later in Hualien versus immediately after self-immolation in the Hong case. And crucially, the evidence.
Right, Hualien had those digital photos as definitive proof.
Whereas the Hong case relied more on a will and claimed ashes that weren't conclusively linked to the children.
So while Liu might have been inspired by the core concept of family annihilation from the Hong case,
the significant differences leaving the bodies, the elaborate misdirection with the notes, taking the photos, show the Hualien case wasn't just a simple copy. It was a kind of recreation, shaped by Liu and Lin's unique psychology. Maybe a stronger need for control, a different way of managing the aftermath, the discovery.
compared to other major crimes like massacres or random killings, the Hualien case seems unique because of that intimate family setting, the parents as the killers.
Yeah, that challenges fundamental social norms, plus the elaborate misdirection and that extended 9-year mystery before it was resolved.
It's widely considered one of Taiwan's most bizarre and most mysterious crimes, isn't it? Because of that suspense, the role technology played, and all those questions that still linger.
Definitely. And it's really transcended being just a crime case. It's become something of a cultural symbol. Often listed among Taiwan's top 10 haunted houses, it's entered urban legend status. Those early supernatural narratives clearly has a lasting impact.
Wow. Okay, so this Hualien 5 children case forces us to look hard at Taiwan's child protection and family support systems. The sources raise the question, were there missed warnings?
That's right. Liu's debt issues, his reported emotional problems, Lin's sister noticing her low mood before it all happened, were these signs that, looking back, might have indicated a family in crisis.
That 2006 Child Welfare League report you mentioned, highlighting risk factors like economic hardship and marital conflict, it was highly relevant then, coinciding with this case.
Exactly. And Taiwan's child protection system was still developing around that time.
So while this specific case didn't necessarily trigger particular new laws,
A tragedy this devastating undoubtedly amplified calls for stronger safety nets, for earlier intervention measures. The fact that news reports at the time often included hotline numbers for domestic violence and suicide prevention reflects that public concern, that desire to strengthen these systems.
the case also starkly illustrates the devastating impact of severe economic pressure and the critical need to address mental health issues. Liu's potential problems, expert speculation about shared psychosis.
It all underlines the importance of accessible mental health services, public awareness, and reducing the stigma around seeking help.
Media ethics also come under scrutiny here, don't they? The sources talk about that.
They do. The intense, often sensational reporting, especially that focus on supernatural elements. While it grabbed public attention, it risked causing secondary trauma to the community. And arguably, it distracted from deeper societal issues like poverty and mental health.
The sources even mention concern about potential imitation effects, especially with later adaptations into films.
Yeah, that concern was raised. It's a real challenge for media, isn't it? Balancing reporting a horrific event with responsibly discussing its complex root causes without just falling into sensationalism.
And law enforcement, they drew lessons too, presumably.
For sure. The value of preserving all evidence, even stuff that seems useless at the time, like a camera without a memory card. You never know what future tech can reveal.
Good point.
Also, the benefit of involving interdisciplinary help, like psychological profiling, and just the sheer difficulty of navigating a crime scene that's been intentionally designed to mislead you.
Ultimately, the Hualien and five children case seems to highlight this tension in how society reacts to such horrors. There's this intense focus on the individual perpetrators, their pathology, the crime's mysteries.
Versus the necessary but maybe less dramatic need for systemic solutions.
Right. That overemphasis on the dramatic and the supernatural, it can overshadow the vital work of strengthening social safety nets, improving mental health support, building effective early crisis intervention, things that might actually prevent the next tragedy. So we've taken a deep dive into the Hualien five children murder case. We've laid out the timeline, the horrifying details of the crime, the twists and turns of that 9-year investigation, the significant social ripples it created, and yeah, the many questions that still remain open.
It's such a stark reminder, isn't it, of the hidden pressure some families face and the devastating consequences when support systems fail or warning signs are missed, however subtle they might seem at the time.
We've seen how technology, years later, played that key role in finally bringing a legal conclusion, but also how complex factors like economic hardship, mental health, even how events are reported, how all that can shape our understanding or sometimes misunderstanding of such deep human tragedies.
This wasn't just a news story. It was a profound human tragedy that became this chilling symbol in Taiwan's history. It revealed vulnerabilities in society that, well, communities and systems are still grappling with.
Perhaps the most provocative thought this case leaves us with is this. If events this horrific, involving such methodical planning and, well, deeply disturbed individuals, could unfold behind closed doors, even when potential pressures might have been visible to some in the family's orbit, how can we truly ensure the safety net is strong enough? How can we make sure warning signs are clear enough to catch the next family on the brink of collapse before it's just far too late?
That's definitely a question worth mulling over.